You are listening to KSG Podcast. This is a short, crisp, concise, exam-oriented, edited editorial for civil services aspirants. In this podcast, we are going to talk about the U.S. law to sanction. Source for the content is Rishika Singh's article for the Indian Express. In July 2022, U.S. Democratic Representative Ro Khanna said the U.S. government must not impose sanctions on India under the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, CATSA, for its purchase of S-400 missile weapons system from Russia. In the past, other American lawmakers have demanded India should not be sanctioned. In April 2021, Republican Senator Todd Young, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, wrote that if the Joe Biden administration imposes sanctions on India, it would undermine their relations and also affect the quadrilateral security dialogue, that is Quad, the strategic security grouping of the US, Japan, Australia, and India that is built as a network of democracies in the Indo Pacific region. The Biden administration has not yet issued a clear statement on whether India might be subjected to sanctions under CATSA, even as India began receiving the weapons from Russia in late 2021. Now, what is the CATSA and could it apply to India? CATSA is a law that came into effect in the US in 2017, meant to punish countries having deep engagements with Russia, North Korea, and Iran using economic sanctions. It said countries having a significant transaction with Russian intelligence and military agents will be subject to at least five kinds of sanctions. Ordinary transactions will not invite sanctions, and the decision of who has sanctions imposed on them comes down to the interpretation of significant transaction. This is one of the various waivers or exemptions mentioned, such as the transaction not affecting US strategic interests, not endangering the alliances it is part of, etc. Section 231 of the law notifies 39 Russian entities, including all the major defense companies like Rosoboronexport, Sukhoi Aviation, Russian Aircraft Corporation, MiG, transactions with whom could invite sanctions. Almaz Ante Air and Space Defense Corporation, JSC, who have made the S-400 system, are in this list. Now, India has purchased the S-400 Triumph missiles, which have advanced capabilities to judge the distance from a target and launch a surface-to-air missile attack. Five such systems were bought by India in 2018 for 5.5 billion US dollars, and in November last year, their delivery began. They were deployed in Punjab. However, the application of CATSA is not limited to the S-400 and may include other joint ventures for manufacturing or developing weapons in the future or any other kinds of major deals with Russia. Now, why did the US enact a law like CATSA? The US flagged issues of Russia's alleged interference in the 2016 presidential elections and its role in the Syrian war as some of the reasons for punishing engagement with it. Former US President Donald Trump, who was accused of colluding with Russia in the elections and during whose term it came into effect, called the act seriously flawed. EU countries such as France and Germany that had even more significant ties with Russia for oil and gas supply before the Ukraine-Russia conflict in 2022 had also criticized CATSA. France's foreign ministry said the new policy seemed at odds with international law due to the extraterritorial reach, according to a Reuters report from the time. In 2020, Turkey was sanctioned for its purchase of the S-400 system. Then, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had said in a press release, and I quote, "Today, the United States is imposing sanctions on the Republic of Turkey's Presidency of Defense Industries for knowingly engaging in a significant transaction with Rosoboronexport, Russia's main arms export entity." Unquote. The release said that Turkey had ignored repeated reminders to not go ahead with the purchase and was therefore sanctioned. So why has India not faced CATSA sanctions yet? The US has never categorically stated whether CATSA would apply to India. In March 2022, it was reported that President Biden was yet to decide on the matter. Donald Lu, Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia, said, and I quote, "India is a real important security partner of ours now, and we value moving forward that partnership. And I hope that part of what happens with the extreme criticism that Russia has faced is that India will find it's now time to further distances." Unquote. With the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the US hardening its stance against Russia, India has continued its neutrality and not joined any of the sanctions against Russia imposed by Western countries. India has mentioned the need for the S-400 missiles for its border defense several times in the past. External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Anurag Srivastava had said in January last year that India has always pursued an independent foreign policy. This also applies to our defense acquisitions and supplies, which are guided by our national security interests. That's it for this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. To join KSJNA courses and to crack the IELTS exam, visit ksjna.com. You can also get a PDF of this podcast on ksjna.com. Thanks for listening and do subscribe to our channel.